person can say they made that champion. You as a coach, you try to do your best job so that you put your components of the jigsaw in place, but it's up to the individual to actually then implement. You lead them, you give the information, but you want the individual has to. We as coaches, we can't just make that champion happen, but it's understanding we're only a small component. A technical coach that says I made that person champion, or a mental coach that says that's entirely wrong, because you are a component of that person's game.
In my personal game, there's not one, and I've had coaching by a lot of people, and there's not one person that I worked with that didn't add value in the grand scheme of things. Early on in my career, I worked hard with Ben Huswaite, Dan Carlisle, and then I went to Steve Schultz. I've worked with Gebben. I've worked with Zach. Corey's helped me a lot, you know, and then you know, guys like Anthony and all those guys, you know, we came up together in a lot of ways. So, you know, every one of those basically had just a little bit to fill up my cup. So there's not one person that I feel like could say, you know, I turned Adam into a really good shooter. His success is because of me, because all of those guys played an individual positive role.
There was a component in there, and I think there's an aspect of where someone that's looking to take their game to a more professional level, how do they decide, how do they work on which coach they should work with? Because one of the things I always say to people is you need a really strong filter, because there's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of noise out there in coaching, but how do you list some great names that have been part of your game. How does someone decide a good coach to go to? What would be your view? There's a personality part to it, there's a technical, because you can have some great shots that aren't necessarily great coaches. How does someone decide the coach that they should work with?
You've got to connect. You've got to connect. You've almost got to be, you've got to feel like you're on a friendship basis, like you and I have been. I mean, you know, I approached you at Nationals 4 years ago, didn't know you at all. Wanted you to come here and do that, and you know, since then you and I have become really close friends. We talk on a weekly basis, we connect, and there's also the trust that the information you're giving me is going to make me better. It's going to give me the confidence to become better. And if you don't have that connection, or you don't have that trust, if you go into it skeptical, it's never going to build into a lasting relationship, because you know it like I know it. In this game, to get better, like every sport there is, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And
I certainly know, even on the mental side, that it's to say I'm hopefully very good at a small component of the mental game.
Yeah.
But there are sometimes I might say, go and read that book, or go and investigate what this other mental coach might do.
Absolutely.
Because we're all components of the jigsaw making that strong game. And there are probably areas within the technical side where you might say, go away and see the targets at this ground, or go and work with this coach, or to see that, because we're only small components of that game. We're not in control of making the whole successful person.
No, the person makes themselves successful. We just get to be a very small piece of that puzzle. It's up to you or I to give the information, and for that person to go work on that information and to become better at that information, and basically make that information subconscious, where you don't have to think about it.
Now, I find as a coach that we can help filter some of that information from the experience that we have. And so I like to work help someone on a wider level. We've talked about wider aspects of your game, the competition management, the preparation, the lifestyle. You're very busy with running a lot of the events here at Westside, and you're coaching at Westside, and that is a balance that has to happen within your own game. And I think sometimes it's you can get lost within that, and as a coach you need to, if a student comes to you and say, hey, I've been shown this technique, or I've got this gun, you're not going to immediately discount it. I remember I had a student the other day, and he was very keen. He said, hey, look, I'm sort of rolling the front grip of the gun here. I was like, great, but why are you doing that? And he couldn't tell me why he started doing it. He'd watched someone DVD and saw them doing it, so he thought he'd just do it. Now, if he said, I have a problem, Henry, of gripping the gun too tightly,
arthritis or something,
great, absolutely. So I think it's making sure that you are a good filter, or work with a coach who can help you filter that information.
The main thing to me is you've got to connect, you've got to trust that person. You've got you know that coach or that instructor needs to be able to go through the ups and the downs with you, because there's always going to be downs, and there are probably going to be more downs than ups, but the ups are very good.
I always say after a tournament weekend, I say, contact me when the emotions have settled down.
Yeah.
Then we'll go through the facts and look at it.
I mean,
and while it's great having someone on the top of the podium, you don't really learn much from that. So I say, bring the facts, and okay, you came further down than you wanted to be. Let's look at the facts from it, but don't bring the emotion into it.
Well, look at that regional, at up there at Caribou.
Mm-hmm.
I ran the course the first day, had a pretty good lead going into it, and basically fell apart. Zach ran the course the last day to end up winning it. I dropped to third. Remember how heartbroken I was? And you basically just like, talk to me in 2 or 3 days.
I'm sensitive to it, but for us to learn from it, I understand the pain that happens behind that. But as a coach, it's looking at the practical. Okay, what can we learn from that?
That's exactly right. And learning from that is putting it into perspective. You being able to put it into perspective and be able to understand that it only made you better. That unless you fail a little bit, you'll never succeed, because you've got to miss the last bird on a course to shoot a 99 in order to eventually shoot that 100, because that builds your mental stamina and your technical stamina to be a better competitor. Relaxed and allowing it to happen, not trying to force it and then it won't happen, because the harder you try, the more you've kind of fuzzied everything up in your head, and now you're too aggressive, which is causing everything not to be able to flow and not allowing you to connect.
So the field of work for what I'm working in is called psychophysiology. It's looking at the interaction between the body and the brain. So one of the first things I'm doing in coaching is actually looking at someone's physiology and seeing how much tension there is. Because if you've got too much physical tension, it's very difficult to have that, or near on impossible, to have that mental attentiveness.
Right.
So you have to, within a pre-shot structure, you're going through the physiology of relaxing to then be able to come to a state of where you have that intense mental state. But it's what you're doing with the body is going to have a very much an impact on, like someone that's constantly re-gripping the golf club or the gun, or you see them being too tense, they cannot have that mental attentiveness.
Well, one of the biggest things I think in my coaching is that you taught me is to not just look out past the gun as a coach, but to look behind the cage as well. Because if you look at the shooter, kind of like the man we were talking about that you coached earlier this week and I taught yesterday, I mean, you could see the physical tension, the try, the effort, the anger in his shoulders, and the way he stood, and the way he bent that knee and went forward. And getting a guy like that to relax and then allowing it to happen, and then you see that big tower shot back there just blow up, and his eyes turn as white as your shirt, and that's the rewarding part of this. And it's not coming because he's not a technically good shooter, because he's got some work to do, but he had some good technique, but it was blending the technical and the mental side of it together, and that's what gave him the clarity to be able to do that. And I think that's successful as a coach and great to see.